Get me some slack.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ashley Ariana, joined by the wonderful and great Tom Jensen. Here to talk a lot of 49er news, Tom. There was a game yesterday. It started out better than I anticipated.
Yeah, me too.
Um, but really quickly, just in general, before we get into the meat of it, how are you doing? I see
I'm
you're
doing
repping
okay. I'm
you're
hanging in.
You're repping a UCLA sweater, and my best friend Lacey, every once in a while she'll watch these streams. She's not big into football, although I think I made her a Lions fan. Like she's a 49ers fan because she likes me, and she's from the Bay Area. But
Okay.
when I was living there last winter, I was telling her about the Lions and how they were kind of like turning their team around. She rooted for the 49ers last night. But anyways, that doesn't matter. She just went to UCLA, so I'm
Oh, cool.
thinking about her.
Yeah.
And then I hope it's okay. But everyone, I want to say, because I had a great Christmas, looking forward to spending a little bit more time with my family, but got to spend some time with friends and stuff. And Tom, who has been such a pleasure to work with, actually sent me this really nice box of chocolates. The lid is off of it because I've opened them and eaten a ton of them, which you can actually see this one, which I sucked the caramel out of like a heathen. Um, there's some of these that are untouched because I did want to share them with my dad, who has such a pleasure chatting with you. And then I also put one in this hot chocolate that then I attempted to
um,
reheat up in the microwave, and then it spilled over into my microwave. So, um,
tasty. That
that
looks good.
I just wanted to say, I hope everyone had a really great holiday season. I know there's a lot of stuff going on with the 49ers that we're going to get into, but I feel like it's important when you can to celebrate moments, whether you're with family or even just by yourself. And I felt really touched that Tom, not only because if you know me, you know I'm a chocolate heathen, but also I'm dairy and gluten free. Tom, the chocolates that he sent me are both of those things, and he told me when he got them that it was because last year my dad actually made me a bunch of chocolates, some of which had like some butterscotch and caramel in them, which these ones do. I felt like it was the most thoughtful gift, and I've had a smile on my face all day. I did send Tom something that I also think is thoughtful, so I feel
Great.
proud of
Look forward
myself
to that.
for that. But it's not there yet because I'm also late to everything. My dad, who's in the chat, is uh, screaming into a pillow right now about that. But anyways, we'll get into the
It's
Niner
the
news.
thought.
I just feel like the world can be messy, and I wanted to, I had some things that I felt like made me smile and made me feel grateful. So I wanted to shout those out. Um, my dad, speaking of him, says, "Hi Ashley, hi Tom, hi guys." So
Hello.
getting into 49ers and football.
Yeah.
They played a game last night, Tom. Usually we have a couple days to digest, and I feel like I'm, maybe a little more reasonable. You're always level-headed, but also firm. How did you feel going into halftime? Were you surprised that the 49ers were putting up the fight that they were?
Yeah, I was. They were up 21-13. They were playing well. And they were a team that was motivated, executing, and they were doing all that despite not having a lot of their players. So I thought the effort was good. They showed a lot of heart. They showed some character, and those are good things. The problem is you just ask, okay, why couldn't you have done this for the Rams game? Why does it take this long for that to show up? But I'm so glad that I saw that because I think it'll give them confidence for next year.
On the TV broadcast, the announcer and play-by-play guy, they talked to the coach before the game, and they actually said something. They said, "Oh, Kyle, he knows the world thinks the Lions is going to come in and, stomp them because they've been so offensively dominant, and he, is really up for the challenge, and he gets excited to be able to play up when people, are down on him." And I was kind of they said this is like a positive thing about Kyle. Like he's really, there's nothing to play for, and he found a way to be motivated, and he's really living up to the challenge. And I was listening, like, don't say this, don't say like you're telling me that he's up for this meaningless Lions game, but didn't get up for the Rams game. And it was so frustrating. I honestly feel like this is how I felt about Debo when Debo actually played well last week. After not playing well, it's like I'd rather you just be bad, and then I can just say, you're old, you're washed, you don't have it in you. But the fact that you showed that when you're motivated, when people are down on you because you missed that, drop that touchdown and whatever, now you're coming out, Debo, and you're playing well instead of like when the team needed you actually showing up and being motivated for them. I kind of apply that to Kyle Shanahan in this situation. The 2 games this year, and maybe there are more, but the 2 recent games that I can think of that the 49ers offensively have looked dominant, and honestly as a team at least played clean, like not committing penalties for the majority of the game, is the Bears and this game. In the first quarter last night, they spread the ball around to 5 different offensive players. In the Bears game, they spread the ball to 7. And I remember after being like, this is a huge problem that Shanahan has. He gets like way too comfortable with one guy. And it's not like he's riding the hot hand. Like he's done this with Christian McCaffrey when McCaffrey was averaging 3 yards per carry. And it's just like over and over. Like he just gets fixated. And we've seen that happen with Debo on one guy. When you actually have, like, you could call a creative offense, and like he called play action, at least in the first half. We're talking about that for now, but play action, he had misdirection. Now, also, it's not lost on me that the Bears and the Lions both have really bad defenses.
Yeah,
So,
I was about to say that is what do they have in common? They can't play. Yeah, both those defenses were Swiss cheese, so that has to be applied. But
Absolutely.
you still get to the point, though, of Kyle made these calls. He could have done this against better defenses. You don't need to play Little Sisters of the Poor to bring this stuff out. And you can play this against the best defenses you face. Why aren't you doing this against Minnesota? Why aren't you doing this against the teams where you really need to get the win? Why aren't you doing this against Seattle or the Rams or the Cardinals? So I think it's still a good question to ask is why are you getting out your bag now? It's too late.
When they talk about like up for the challenge or like motivated, like as to me, just think about like in your own life or your own career. I used to play sports. So I think about like my former, when I got the most motivated was when I was going against someone who would always beat me or who was always, better.
Yeah.
And to me, that challenged me. Like, okay, they're this good. I even right now, this is a silly example, but I started taking workout classes again because I was just like not motivated by going to the gym by myself. And like I go to these classes and you're running on a treadmill next to someone, and you could technically do that on your own, but in my brain, I like look over, and if if the instructor's like, okay, go a little faster, and I'm tired, but the person next to me goes up, I'm like, okay, I got to go up one, And to me,
Yeah.
it's like, why would Kyle, like, maybe because he felt like he's being compared to Ben Johnson in this, if I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. But to me, it's like, if your offensive system is so good, wouldn't you want to be proving that against the best defenses? Like, wouldn't you want your creativity to shine when you're going against, when you think about he now works for the Seahawks, defensive coordinator for the Seahawks, Brian Flores on the Vikings.
Yeah, or Mike McDonald in Seattle. But either way, that should be the challenge that motivates you as opposed to going up against another offensive coordinator that's thought of well.
Yeah.
You're not competing against Ben Johnson.
Exactly.
You're competing against the defensive coordinator. But I would caution that's what the announcers are saying. I'm not sure if that's what was actually Kyle's thought process.
True.
Part of this is just you have to remember also the other context in this is the patchwork offensive line dictated a lot in this game because those guys didn't know the playbook, hadn't played together. And so what Kyle's going to default to is passing more because you can't run wide zone with guys that don't know where they have to be, what their assignments are. You can't just sign somebody off a practice squad from another team and then drop them in and say, okay, play. And then usually what you're going to have to do is say, we're going to have to throw a lot because you all know how to pass protect. So it dictated the game plan to an extent because of that.
I'm a novice, but at least maybe towards the end, but I was looking and obviously stats can lie and people can pick different stats up. But did the offensive line actually perform okay last night? Like I felt like
They did all
and
right.
maybe it was the way Kyle was play calling. Maybe he was like aware that he couldn't call certain plays, but I would encourage whatever he did last night seemingly worked better and seems to be what guys like you and I have been calling for all season is that like more quick throws, like get the ball out of your hand instead of the 7-step drop back, which to me has always been, a not a highlight of the Shanahan system.
Right.
So I thought that the offensive line, like going into it, I was like wrap Brock Purdy in double tape, and we'll get to Brock Purdy and his injury. But going into it, I was like, he's gonna take a million sacks, like this is gonna be bad. I actually think like the offensive line out there without Aaron Banks played better. I thought that they held up for the most part. I'm not
They did
saying they were like
okay.
the best offensive line, but I thought they
No,
played better
they play.
than last week's offensive line.
Well, yeah, yes and no. It's they gave up only 2 sacks, so in that part they did okay.
Yeah.
And Kyle went to a rhythm offense in a faster pace and get the ball out because Detroit is such a frequent blitzer because they blitz like a third of their plays because they don't have Aiden Hutchinson. So Kyle knew that coming in that he had to get the ball out quickly, and that factored into the game plan as well. But run game they weren't that great. They had what 12 carries for 50 yards
Saw
for
that.
Debo and Garendo. So they didn't run that effectively. And the reason why is because they don't know the plays. So
Yeah.
it's you're dumbing down the offense for that offensive line because they don't know what they're doing. So it has to be what those 5 guys know how to do together. And
That's
that had a big
interesting.
influence in the game. But in the places they did run, they did okay,
But
especially in the passing game.
I will say though, sorry, because I'm like figuring this out as you're talking. I and we'll get to it was critical of Kyle obviously getting very pass happy at the end.
Yeah.
And just even in my post game last night, I was talking about I felt like the Lions were much more balanced and that
Yeah.
helped them with their play action rollouts because they were also running the ball. And I felt like that took some pressure off of Jared Goff. And I was kind of wondering why Kyle was so. I mean, if you add in Josh Dobbs as well as Brock Purdy, they passed for 412 yards and they only ran for 75. Like, that's extremely unbalanced. I was like, oh, does
Yeah.
he not trust Isaac Garendo? Like, I didn't understand. Your the offensive line didn't know how that makes sense. So maybe that's not all on Kyle, would you
It's
say?
not. It's not.
Okay.
Far be it from me to defend Kyle, but in this
Huh.
case, you do because the offensive line doesn't know any better. I mean, they can't run the wide zone because they don't know the playbook yet. They've been here 3 days, 4 days, and you signed a guy off of a practice squad from another team, then you parachute him in. Okay, play. Yeah. So naturally, Kyle's going to throw more anyway. But my objection would be you still had some place you could run. You still had some
Yes.
vanilla basic runs. And even if it wasn't necessarily going to be tremendously successful, for a team balance perspective and to give the defense more rest, you've got to do something. You can't just throw. But the caveat, the asterisk in all this is with the patchwork offensive line. I said in my game preview, and this was clear going into the game, Kyle is going to game plan for a heavy passing attack because he has to, given that offensive line and given the Detroit blitzes so much. So you have to factor both of those
Okay. That makes a lot. I did read that in your game preview, but it makes a lot more sense putting it more on the patchwork offensive line.
in.
Um, I do think like this year, a lot of these guys are going to be up for new deals. Kyle talked after the game. It doesn't look like Spencer Burford is going to play in the season finale. Aaron Banks will probably be out. I do think they should move off of some of these players just because I don't think they're going to be worth the amount of money that just offensive linemen are so valuable that I
Yeah.
think they'll probably get bigger contracts. I'm hoping with that first round pick that they go offensive line. I could also see them doing defensive line. There was like replays where Nick Bosa was getting a sack or disturbing Jared Goff, maybe not even getting sacked, but just kind of moving him off the ball. And the broadcast would re-show the play. And it was like all the offensive linemen completely blocking, none of the defensive linemen getting past them except for Nick Bosa. It was
Right.
like Jared Goff here, Nick Bosa like here, and then all the other defensive linemen were getting no pressure at all.
Right. Completely out of the play getting blocked.
Yeah, they
And
were
then
not
Nick
making
Bosa's
an
the only
impact.
one doing anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're gonna have to invest in the defensive line. And that's what this draft gives you, is that this draft is best at edge and defensive tackle. So
That's
what
good
they
to know because
should
I feel like it's
do,
not a great draft in general. So it's good to know that that is where the
yeah,
strength
and
is.
and especially where they draft. They probably draft 11th. If they lose to Arizona, that's where they'll pick. They can't move higher than that in the draft. So if you're at 11, the best value on the board at that point is defensive tackles and defensive edges. So I think that's where they're probably going to go. The other problem, I heard you with the collective the other day saying that you want offensive line. Everybody does. I mean, every 49er fan, if you take any poll on Twitter or whatever, I want offensive line. Every single one is like 99% offensive line.
I think I was talking with Chase and he was like, "Oh, it's not a sexy pick." And I was like, "I think fans are past that." Like, I think if they were to
Yeah,
get like a wide receiver, people would start rioting. Now, you highlighted, I don't know if you want to we can go into it right now just cuz we're already talking about it, but you in your article highlighted two different offensive players not your penalty flags. But in your article that you put out today, um I think one's a tight end, one's a kind of do it all running back.
running back.
And
Yeah, yeah, and
yeah.
they're playing in about an hour. So Ashton Genty, who's the running back from Boise State, he nearly has 2,500 yards rushing. He doesn't have that many yards receiving this year, but last year he had almost 600. So he's somebody that you could draft and then say, all right, this is the CMC replacement.
Yeah.
And you look at what Purdy has done, and he's been effective when he had peak CMC.
Mhm.
So if you want Purdy to improve, and if they plan to extend him, one way that you can make Purdy better is to get somebody like Ashton Genty in the draft if he's on the board at 11. The other one is Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State.
Really quick. I love that you broke it down really quickly while we're talking about Ashton Genty. I love that you brought him up because if you look at Kyle and the years that this team has done well under Kyle, it's they were floundering, and then with Mike McDaniel and Debo Samuel, they found a wrinkle. Debo became the gadget, do it all guy, threw defenses off for a year, and really took the league by storm. They go to the Super Bowl. Then they're floundering again. They trade a ton for Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, both with Jimmy Garoppolo while he was still playing, and then after Jimmy Garoppolo went down with Brock Purdy, obviously looked like an all-star. Was in it. If it wasn't such a quarterback award, he would have won MVP last year. He did get the offensive player of the year. And even going back to Kyle Shanahan's dad with Terrell Davis, feels like their offense, the Shanahan offense, at least the way they run it, really flourishes or almost needs or relies on having like one all-star offensive player because they're dealing with kind of mediocre quarterback play, at least when you look at Brock and Jimmy. And it's not it's offense reliant, let's say. Like if they have a star, they're not gonna bring it down. But if they don't have a star and it's all on them, then they're not gonna be able to flourish. So
Right.
I can see why I like understand the logic with okay, Kyle's still gonna be the coach, then you need to make type of draft pick. But at the same time, when you see these other players, Sam Darnold going to the Vikings, obviously they have offensive stars, but Jared Goff, going to the Lions, they have offensive stars. But I feel like they built a foundation that then their quarterbacks and stars play on top of, and that's the trenches. That's their offensive line. And I think the 49ers, like, their critical mistake and why they're so up and down, like, earlier this year, a couple of weeks ago, when they were eliminated from the playoffs, there was all these, stats going on, or like, little things on Twitter that showed with the 49ers, they either make an NFC championship game or Super Bowl, or they miss the playoffs altogether. Like they're
Yeah.
very boom or bust. They're not average. And I think that's because they're relying on like one player who like gets beat down instead of like actually having strength in a in the trenches. And
Well,
so
and that's all about Kyle.
I disagree with Kyle's negligence on the offensive line.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
oh, if we have a star running back, then the offensive line can be mediocre because he'll make them look better. Where I'm like, okay, but then what we just saw with Christian McCaffrey is like that might work for 1 year, but then when that guy gets older, when that guy gets worn down, then like you don't have a solid foundation for your other guys to flourish under. Where
exactly right.
if you fix the foundation, then you wouldn't have to have an all-star. Maybe you just have a really good player and he can look like an all-star because of the foundation is so good.
Right. And you look at the NFC and say, okay, who are the best teams? Detroit, Philadelphia, Minnesota. What do
Yeah.
they have in common? Great offensive lines.
Yeah.
And you look at the year that Saquon Barkley's having,
She has
and
had this whole career resurgence with that
right,
offensive line.
right. But if it was Kyle Shanahan, it would have been Saquon Barkley having a great season, carrying
Yeah.
the team to the NFC Championship, and then losing in the Super Bowl or losing in the NFC Championship game, and then going back down because he doesn't invest in the foundation. He invests in a single player. He rides the dominance of a running back. So you have the Debo year where he's wide back, and you have the CMC year last year. But if you invest in the offensive line, you don't need that dominant running back. And it's the rising tide lifts all boats concept of if you had a great offensive line, you wouldn't need to have an all-world running back, and you wouldn't only be able to go to the playoffs or make a deep run if you had a great running back in his prime. You
Yeah.
could just have the offensive line. But Kyle, because he's wide zone, because the author of the wide zone is a guy from Denver who's connected to his dad, and Alex Gibbs, the father of the wide zone, says you don't need an offensive tackle with long arms that you draft in the first. You just need dogs. And Kyle has taken that to heart. And so you don't get an investment in the offensive line other than left tackle with Trent. Everything to the right of Trent is dirt cheap and usually is not a high draft pick. Yeah, and Aaron Banks was a second rounder, but they're going to let him go.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake Brendel was UDFA. Pooney is third round.
They need to work on
McKivitz
their
is fifth
center.
round.
You
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's your article from today, or just previous conversations and things that you've written, but they really need a new center in my opinion. Like
Oh, they've
when
got one.
Alex and this is one position, like with a lot of the offensive line, I think of Chris Forrester basically saying that he encourages the team to like bargain bin because they need the talent and he can coach them
Yeah.
up, whatever.
Yeah,
And
but
obviously,
what else is Chris going to
what else
say?
is he supposed to say? But what a like, so we know that Kyle is negligent about the offensive line. The one area that Kyle has said that he wants like a good player at that position is center. When they
Yeah.
got Alex Mack, which was kind of surprising because he was older and expensive and then ended up retiring in his contract. But the reason that they like when Kyle was asked why did you go out and get him, he explained that he puts a lot on his center. His center is the one that calls protections. His center is like the foundation of the offense and really has to have familiarity with Kyle's system, and with getting like they want a veteran at that position. And it's kind of interesting to me that they've like like Kyle has outwardly to the public said this is important to me, and then they've settled with this player that should be, in my opinion, like a depth backup piece. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to shit on Jake
Yeah.
Brendel, but like I think Jake
Yeah.
Brendel thought he was going to be a backup. Like
Well,
I think
sure.
it's surprising to him that he's in this
Probably
position.
so. And the only reason he is starting is because of Shanahan's philosophy.
Yeah,
Any other team, he wouldn't. And
yeah.
here I am wearing a UCLA hoodie and going after Jake Brendel. Sorry, dude. But he went to UCLA. But regardless, it's
Blasphemy.
yeah. So what they've done and what they're already doing is cheap free agents to plug in the holes. because that's what Kyle wants to do. He wants to use the offensive line as a cap saving center other than Trent. So what did they do? Under the radar, and nobody paid attention to it, but it's key. Matt Hennessy, the guy they signed to a 2-year deal, Kyle was all over him with praise, saying this is the guy we won in the draft a couple years ago. Chris Forster, same thing. Hennessy's going to be their starting center next year. He's the guy that's going to replace Brendel. They're not going to draft a center. And this is a bad year for centers anyway. The best centers are 3rd round, 4th round. So you're not going to get a great center like you would have last year. So that's part of this. But you have to approach the offensive line the way Kyle would. Yeah. So what's Kyle really going to do? Here's what I expect, and people are going to hate it, but it's Kyle. Your starting center is Matt Hennessy. Your starting left guard is Ben Barch, who they'll have to re-sign. He played well when he started, but he only started that one game. But he can play left guard, and he can also back up at center. And then you bring back Jalen Moore, and there's your backup tackle. Now you've got the 3 offensive line players you need, according to Kyle. Do you draft anybody in the offensive line? I wouldn't count on it. And certainly not early. Because I've gone through another article that I released today was on the draft. My mock draft for the first 100 picks. Offensive line is not in those first 4 picks. That's what's going on. That's Kyle. Now, part of this is me being the pessimist and highlighting Kyle Shanahan's deficiencies as GM and saying, here's what he's going to do. But his history says this is what he's going to do.
To be fair, all year, I think I've tried to be overly optimistic, and you've been the realist, and you've been right every single time. Also, when the 49ers were winning yesterday, I was like, are they going to win? And I was texting my dad, and my dad was like, they're going to blow it. And unfortunately, right now, until they prove us otherwise, I think being pessimistic or realistic, because I don't even think it's pessimistic, I just think it's being honest, is the way to go if you don't want to be surely disappointed in yourself. But I will, regardless, be disappointed if they do not target the offensive line first. Now, going into the end of the game, I actually think the game would have been less painful if in the first quarter they got down by 20 and they just held that. They just lost by 20 and all game, they were down and there was kind of no hope and it was a blowout, which is what a lot of people predicted. But instead, the 49ers are winning and they do the horribly typical at this point 49er thing of just blowing a lead. Kyle Shanahan obviously got pass happy. Now there was some reasons for that, but Brock Purdy in a game that didn't matter felt the pressure. Now maybe he would argue, these games probably mattered for him and his contract, but he threw 1 interception. Jake Moody missed 2 field goals, an extra point, kicked the worst onside kick. Somehow the onside kick was worse than the missed field goals.
How can you do that? How can you drill an onside kick? It's just that goes against exactly what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to be a soft kick.
Yeah, but just it was a collapse in something that was so. It felt to be fair, it felt like fitting. You know what I mean? If they would have won that game, it's all these excuses and them telling themselves they're the best team all year and it's been injuries. I think they could have bought into that more. Where the way they lost was so resembled what they've done all year so much that to me it forces it in your face and it goes, this is who you are. The person, the team, the player, the coach that you're telling yourself that you could have been or you are, but the one-off thing. No. This is who you are now. Going into the off season, hold this and make the necessary adjustments. We'll start with talking about Brock Purdy before we get to Jake Moody. Brock Purdy. Now 3 games in a row and multiple other this year, fumbles, interceptions, has more interceptions in the second half than he does touchdowns by triple. Not by 1 or 2, but literally more than double. Specifically in the fourth quarter, he really melts down. And did something similar in the most important game of the season, which was against the Rams, then did it again last week, and then again, not only in the fourth quarter at first, he throws an interception, and it's like, oh no. And the announcers and other, the people that I was with, we were kind of saying, oh, is that it? Is that the game? 49ers, they get the ball back after the Lions score. Jake Moody misses another freaking field goal. The Lions go back, they score. Brock Purdy has another opportunity, fourth quarter as well. And like I said, I think he's kind of gotten the like game losing interception out of the way. I'm like, okay, well, he's done it already. No. Then he doubles down and throws another game losing fourth quarter interception. What's going on with Brock Purdy? Why? Like, is this just who he is? He needs,
This year, it is. Um, I think there's a lot of things going on. I think he's putting a lot of pressure on himself because of the contract,
yeah.
and so he's pressing. But
My
I
dad said
also,
that. My dad said you can see he's pressing. He's pressing.
yeah, but there are other things that are below the surface of that are concerning. He's not learning from his mistakes. He's making the same interceptions. You can go back and say, here's a game from week 2, here's a game from week 4, and here's the same interception. That's a problem.
That's
What
concerning.
what the Niners did, and I thought this was brilliant in the Walsh era. Mike Holmgren met with Joe Montana and would go over the interceptions and say, "Was this your fault or not?" If they determined that it was, and it wasn't a wide receiver and a tip ball or whatever, if they said this was your fault, Joe, Holmgren took the play out of the playbook and said, "We're not running this again
Okay.
because you're not executing this the way we need to." Shanahan
Love
has
that.
to do that with Brock, especially given that he's making the same mistake, he's making the same interception for the same reasons. They need to do that with Purdy.
I like that. And one, I mean, Joe Montana, he has kind of the opposite reputation of Brock Purdy, right? Like his whole thing was Joe Cool. Like in the fourth quarter, even if he was down, he was going to come back and win it for you. But
Yeah,
I
well,
like
Hall of
one,
Fame, different quarterback, the GOAT, but yeah. But
yeah.
I love the process though. That's what's needed is the process of that.
Well, to me, it not only highlights like a difference between obviously Joe Montana, best quarterback ever, and Brock in their ability to learn, but to me, that highlights the coaching deficiency. There was a coach
Exactly.
there that said, okay, we're going to go through this together. First, we're just going to watch it. We're going to say, how did this happen? And then, second of all, we're going to learn from it. And I would actually bring this to Brock Purdy after the game, unlike Jimmy Garoppolo, every time he would throw an interception, I felt like he had goldfish for brains. And as a fan watching, it was very frustrating because he'd throw an interception and then be smiling, laughing,
Right.
and going to the press conference like, "Oh, no big deal." And you're like, "Dude, you just like, did you see how you set the game on fire?" Like, I just had a panic attack. You guys came back and won, but you made that incredibly difficult because you threw these interceptions. But it was like it didn't phase him, which on a personal level is aggravating, but in a quarterback sense, maybe is good because Brock Purdy, you can see he throws one, and I don't know if it's the pressure of the contract. I don't know if it's pressure of Kyle Shanahan, who obviously was very animated on the sideline,
Yeah.
in my opinion, a little bit too much so, kind of showing up his quarterback. Going back to looking at the other team, Jared Goff did protect the football last night, but Jared Goff had a 5 interception game earlier this year where Dan Campbell wasn't doing the theatrics that Kyle Shanahan was just doing. There's something in your coach instilling confidence and belief in you that I think Kyle tends to not do with his quarterbacks. But
Yeah. Well, and that's Kyle the
Brock Purdy says
perfectionist coming out.
Brock Purdy, like you said, going back, he's throwing the same interception after the game last night, but also after the game in week 2, in week 3. Anytime he's thrown an interception, something one that you can love about him, but also that maybe it's like talk is good, but what about action? He'll go to the press conference and he'll go, I'm going to learn from that. That's on me. That was my bad. I have to be better. I'm going to learn from that. I love taking accountability, especially on a
Yeah,
team
no
where it
doubt.
feels like a lot of people don't. But that the I'm gonna learn from it part, what you're highlighting is, well, you're kind of throwing the same interception over and over and over again. So it's nice that he's saying that because that's what a leader should do. But when it comes to action and during the week, when you are supposed to be learning from that, that needs to one be on Brock and two be on the coaches, whether that's the quarterback coach or Kyle Shanahan stepping up
Well,
as a head coach.
it's on all of them collectively to say that
Yeah.
we have to find a solution. I'm sure your thoughtfulness and your appreciation that Brock, unlike most of the team and Kyle specifically, is willing to take accountability on himself. I love that. But you also have to follow through on it. You can't just say,
Yeah.
"Well,
You
that's on
can't
me.
just
I have to learn."
bullshit.
Okay, where's the learning? And I think this is the key development issue for Brock in the offseason. You have to go through where your interceptions are coming from and stop that behavior. You have to stop overreacting to pressure. You have to
Yep.
stop putting the game on your own shoulders and saying, I have to be the hero, I have to make the play. And you have to have the judgment to stop yourself from throwing the ball into double coverage more often than not and putting the ball up for grabs. You need to learn from this and say, okay, what do I need to do differently? What I did see in last night's game that I liked was that for the first time, I saw Brock throwing the ball away where nobody could get it because he didn't have a play.
Mhm.
I thought that
I
was
like that
growth.
instead of forcing it or
That
taking a sack.
yeah, I thought that was growth because I haven't seen much of that from Brock at all. And last night he had some of those where he just threw the ball away, and
Yeah. So you can,
it was the smartest play he could make. I want to see a lot more of that, and I want to see him understand that that's what he needs to do. Rather than throwing the ball up for grabs and trying to play hero, throw the ball away, live to see another day, but learn from your mistakes, don't repeat them. That's what he has to work on. That's job one of the offseason.
yeah. And the interesting thing with that is like you see that he has the capability to learn if
Sure.
it's something that either he's, watching on tape or like he's not incapable of progressing.
Oh, yeah, he can do
Obviously, this
that.
is not something that whatever they're doing to fix his interception problem is not something that's working, and they need to reevaluate how they go back about that. And you and
Yeah,
I were kind of just talking. Brock Purdy's throwing the same interceptions that he was, week two. But I would go all the way back, and I'm not a huge college football fan, but Brock Purdy himself has kind of talked about why his final year at college was so, it really brought down his draft stock. And a lot of that was him putting it all on his shoulders, which he partially had to with his team, but it was
yeah,
bad. It was inaccuracy. It was bad decision making. Brock Purdy doesn't have the strongest arm. So when he is going to be like if Brock Purdy's ever going to be elite or even just a great football player, he needs to excel in other areas. Like, and I'm not saying I know we're going to get some angry people that he can throw the ball down the field, but he doesn't have crazy arm strength. He doesn't have a ton of zip on his throws. A lot of them float in the air. The reason he was in the MVP conversation last year, he was throwing the ball down the field even a little bit less last year, but he was executing the system perfectly. He was throwing with anticipation, but not too much so that the wide receiver, if the play broke down, that he was going to get intercepted, but he wasn't throwing it late. He was on time. He stood strong in the pocket. Like he felt calm under pressure. That was something, I mean, Brock Purdy got praise for that his very first game in the NFL, how calm
yeah,
he walked in to a situation that tons of rookies or younger, guys who weren't expected to play would have kind of looked and from a fan watching perspective, you could have felt like, oh, this guy, he's drowning. He's in over his head. The strength of Brock Purdy was his coolness, his calmness, his like leadership in that way really early on. And it's kind of interesting that like the more time he's spent with the 49ers, that specific thing that used to be a highlight is kind of lacking this final year.
yeah. I don't think he's playing as organically or as instinctively as he did last year, and that brings into question, okay, is Kyle in his head? Is
Yeah.
that part of the problem? Is Greasy in his head? Is that part of the problem? All of them need to go through and say, look, it worked in 2023, it failed in 24. Why? You have to, John Lynch said, KNBR, that they have to get to root causes. One of the root causes they need to fix is Purdy's mindset. He has to make better decisions. He has to understand when he gets into trouble and why, and fix it. And all of them have to work on that. But I don't get the sense that they will, is the problem. Is that this is something that primarily is a coaching effort issue of we need to meet Brock where he is now and fix the mindset. Are they willing to do that, or are they just going to say you didn't execute my play correctly? It's just, where is your coaching going to? In Brock's case, he needs a quarterback coach that can take him to his mindset and fix where he goes off the rails, where he makes the bad decisions, where he makes the same interception decision tree. How do you fix that? How do you change that? That's where it needs to be. Part of that is Purdy pressing because of the contract. Part of that is Kyle pressing because that's what Kyle does. But what does Greasy do? That's kind of a black box for all of us. We don't really know what's going on there. But my suggestion is you have to fix what's happening in Brock because when Brock plays instinctively, he's a great quarterback in this league. When Brock is overthinking what he's doing, that's when he gets into trouble.
And
Got to
that's
fix
probably
it.
why he's such like hit if you look at him his stats, first half versus second half, he's like a totally different quarterback. He protects the
Yeah, I don't
football in the
get that.
first half. You don't think so?
Oh no, I'm just saying that I don't understand that or I don't get that. It's that's another element for him is that he's got to lay down a level of consistency where
Yeah.
who you are in the first half is who you are all game. It
It's
shouldn't
very
be
it's very weird, right?
this Jekyll and Hyde, and it is. Why? Get to that, fix it.
That was something you talked about in your articles, like, how do you make Brock more consistent throughout 4 quarters?
Yeah,
And obviously, like, when we're talking about the 49ers as a whole, I would also expand that logic to Kyle, who also
yeah,
seemingly is a different coach depending on what, quarter it is and if they're winning and losing. But it's
no
very,
doubt.
in my opinion, concerning that Brock Purdy protects the football. He has 2 turnovers this year in the first half, too. And
Yeah,
most of his touchdowns are coming in the first half. And then the second half, it's a complete opposite. He has more interceptions in the second half than he does touchdowns.
and
Like,
that's
and those
something he
are,
has
by
to
the way, the
ask.
most important. Like, if I want my quarterback to be consistent across the board, but if I was gonna choose which half for them to be the best
Yeah,
in, it
I'd
would be
switch
the
him
later
up.
half. Yeah.
Right, right. You want the second half quarterback to be a guy that can execute, that can lead a comeback, and that's not happening. When has Brock thrown a come from behind touchdown for a win? I don't think he has. You know, part of that
That's
is that the Niners scheme is built on building a lead and coasting to the win. That's what Kyle's scheme is basically trying to accomplish each week. But when you can't do that, and that's going to be more the case going forward as the
yeah.
core ages, you're going to be in competitive games. So you have to get Brock into a better mindset so that he doesn't fall down this rabbit hole. How come he's doing this? And obviously, he's pressing. We can see that. Even on a TV screen, we can see that.
Yes.
So that has to be fixed. They have to go at Brock's mindset to fix him, and they have to put pieces around him to make him better. Now, ideally, what you do is you build up the offensive line, and everybody in the NFL except Kyle has got the memo that you have to invest in the offensive line to make your quarterback succeed and make your offense win. That's what all the winning teams do. That's what every contender in the NFL does, except this one, because of Kyle Shanahan, because of the wide zone, because of Alex Gibbs, because of you don't want to have an offensive tackle in the first round with long arms. No. It, the way that Brock Purdy succeeds is when he's not pressured. You look at his quarterback rating, it's off the charts when he doesn't have any pressure. Brock, when he's got time to throw, is great. Brock, when he doesn't, is bad. Brock,
Yeah.
when he's pressing in the fourth quarter and he's being pressured and his offensive line is getting tired and the defense is getting to him, and then he makes the same mistake and throws the same interception. All of that could be fixed by investing in the offensive line. Kyle won't do it. And why do I say Kyle has to be replaced as GM? This is the first reason, the primary reason. Investment in the offensive line. Kyle won't do it.
Absolutely.
Kyle won't do it.
Really, we have a super chat, but really quickly, while talking about Brock Purdy, some of the stuff we're talking about is more going to be long term and their off-season plans because Brock Purdy is potentially not going to play in the season finale against the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think that he will. Kyle Shanahan said he probably won't because he currently has an elbow contusion with nerve inflammation, which I don't love the sound of. So for anyone who was waiting for a Brock Purdy update, Kyle Shanahan did talk earlier today, unlike Tom, who's currently not going to be able to talk. But but da, da, da. Tom, we're almost out of it
Here we
anyway.
go.
But
Yeah, sorry.
it's okay.
The
But
hamsters in my ISP are getting tired.
I was just updating people that the imaging that has came back, what Kyle Shanahan said today, was that Brock Purdy has an elbow contusion and nerve inflammation. Last night, I was kind of side-eyeing Kyle because, well, first of all year, Kyle has incorrectly downplayed multiple, players and their injuries that they've gotten throughout the year. Pretty much every player that has a major injury, Kyle came out before their actual, diagnosis was given and really downplayed. Sometimes even after the diagnosis was given, downplayed it. And then, these players are on IR and missing the entirety of the rest of the season. So I side-eyed Kyle when he really, seemingly didn't give, like, I think one thing that I'll say about Purdy is I think if he can play, he's going to play. I don't think he's ever going to voluntarily take himself out of a game just because they're losing or whatever. And to me, the way Kyle talked about it gave a little bit of that vibe, and maybe that's more on my interpretation. But the difference from Kyle being like, oh, we'll figure it out, no big deal right now, and then Brock Purdy coming out and saying, my arm and elbow, by the way, the surgically repaired elbow on the throwing arm, so like the most important,
Yeah.
precious part of a quarterback that has already been injured for Brock comes out and says that it was on fire, that he attempted on the sideline to throw. And if you actually saw those throw attempts on the broadcast, he couldn't move his arm.
Right.
So Eric Branch, who, I was grateful, asked the follow-up question right after Brock Purdy said his arm was on fire. He said, how does this compare to, Philadelphia when you had that UCLA, when you had that UCL plane, in his elbow from when he had his major injury in the NFC Championship game. And Brock said that it felt very similar, but that, they had gone through some initial tests and there was going to be imaging. Apparently, what the imaging shows right now, elbow contusion, which is just like a really, really deep, bad bone bruise,
Right.
and then nerve inflammation. His season is likely done, according to Kyle Shanahan, but
It is.
apparently there's going to be no long-term issues. I
They
do
hope.
struggle to not look a couple weeks ago when Brock Purdy had, the shoulder arm soreness, and apparently there was imaging done during that time, and Kyle was basically like, I don't know why he's not playing, nothing's showing up, and Brock Purdy was like, I want to play, but my arm feels like it's falling off. I hate to bring up the contract situation, but a lot of people in the first half were saying anyone who doubted that Brock Purdy's earning his $60 million. Well, one, he's throwing multiple interceptions at the end of games, so that kind of negates it. And two, even if he didn't throw two interceptions, I'm hesitant to lock a guy up for more than 1 year when you aren't 100% sure how his throwing arm, the only function that he has, or his number one function that he has, is potentially going through repeated year after year injury.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because you
a
look
little
at
bit
something
better.
like what happened against Detroit and saying, can't that happen again in almost any game?
Yeah.
And what would that do to Brock in terms of just his ability to throw? So that's always going to be a risk. Plus, he's small to begin with. Part of the issue here with Brock is just he's a small guy.
Yeah.
NFL's a violent game. He's not going to be able to hold up that well if this is continuing to be a problem.
And
And
that
so,
everything goes back to the offensive line, Tom. Everything goes
yeah,
back
oh, sure
to
it does.
style and the philosophy. Because if he's going to continue to be the quarterback, even if this one injury heals this offseason, it's like, okay, well, what happens next season when he's throwing and his arm is pushed back because he doesn't have an offensive line, or when he's scrambling and he's tackled and that arm gets thrown into the ground, or a 300-pound defensive lineman lands on top of it, like. stuff like that is going to continue to happen. And obviously, some of it's going to happen no matter what. Like football is football, but
Yeah.
the way that you protect your quarterback is by investing in the offensive line. And to me, it's not shocking that Kyle has had all of his starting quarterbacks since he's been with the 49ers have gone through major injuries. And I think, instead of just being like, oh, bad luck, it's like, okay, well, how does Kyle build his team? And does that maybe, is there a pattern with, Kyle Shanahan constantly getting his starting quarterback hurt?
Sure. Well, it goes hand in hand. If you don't invest in your offensive line, your quarterback is going to be more vulnerable. Period. Um, Steve-O says running
That's
backs
a
hold
good
up at
call, too.
5'10", though. They do, Steve-O, but think of the positions that they're in. The running back is holding the ball, and he's already a shell, basically, protecting himself against contact. The quarterback is going to be completely exposed. Think of what happened when Purdy got hit by Hassan Reddick in Philadelphia. That he doesn't have any of that shell. He's got his arm out, his body is completely exposed to contact, bang. And that's the difference. So you can say, yeah, anybody of that height, running backs don't get hurt that way.
Yeah.
But they aren't,
When
their
you're a quarterback,
bodies are not exposed the way a quarterback would be.
the stance that you're in
Um,
as a quarterback is literally open because you're opening yourself up to
right.
be, to a much more violent hit than when you're a running back. You're kind of already bracing in your stance. I completely agree. Um, we're going to move off of Brock Purdy now, and we're going to talk about some other player that consistently has lost the 49er football games. And I have to talk in this voice when I talk about Jake Moody because I said last year in the regular season, I
You
think
did.
honestly, in the beginning of the regular season,
Early. Yeah.
an entire season ago, I said the 49ers, because I noticed that Kyle has a pattern, much like you pointed out with your draft picks that you think Kyle might want to go after. I noticed that if Kyle has a healthy quarterback and a star running back, that team gets to the Super Bowl. So I said, I predict this team is going to go to the Super Bowl, and then this stupid kicker that can't make a kick is going to blow it. And there was a million reasons that they didn't win that Super Bowl. One of them that I think, by the way, gets off the hook too much is the fact, like, Kyle, idiot, should not be the coach, does not know the overtime rules. Also, earlier this week, he was like, we want to upset the Lions. They need to hire someone to teach Kyle Shanahan NFL rules because he embarrasses himself way too much. But he wouldn't have had the opportunity to look like such a doofus in the overtime of the Super Bowl if they didn't go to overtime, which would have happened if Jake Moody just made his stupid kicks last year. For
Yeah,
some
exactly.
reason, they went, oh, we don't care. We love Jake Moody. And they brought him back. Then Jake Moody stuck it up all this year after, by the way, coming back. And every guy that they got off the couch, literally not in the NFL, kicked better than Jake Moody. So then he stinks it up. And like a week ago, maybe two at this point, someone goes, hey, Kyle, your kicker freaking sucks. What do you have to say about that? They don't say it, they asked it in a much more
Yeah,
beat
they
reporter way. But
yeah,
he stood behind Jake Moody this week,
right.
talked about his confidence, gave him a vote of allegiance, said what a great kicker he is and that you got to stand by him, yada, yada, yada. And just to really embarrass him, Jake Moody played probably his worst game because he's had multiple games where he's missed multiple field goals. He's had multiple games where he's missed multiple extra points. This game, multiple field goals, extra point, onside kick. Like, there was anything that could go wrong for Jake Moody did go wrong. I appreciated George Kittle being the team captain that he should be, unlike Deebo Samuel. I love that George
Yeah.
Kittle, talked to him at least during the game. What are you going to do during the game? But in my opinion, after the game, you can say, hey, Jake Moody, we got to sit down. We got to sit down. He absolutely should not be back next year. But in my opinion, he shouldn't be playing against the Cardinals. I know it's just one game, but we've talked a lot. Nick Bosa has talked a lot about this. Fred Warner is playing on a, broken ankle. They have a standard to live up to as the 49ers that they need to be showing their young guys. They need to be showing the rookies and the veterans just for their pride. And to me, going out there with Jake Moody is stupid. They win yesterday's game. Obviously, a million people did things wrong. if Brock Purdy doesn't turn over the ball, if Kyle sticks with his play calling from the first half. But also, one of the things that they could have won if Jake Moody just made his stupid kicks. Why today Kyle Shanahan was asked again about Jake Moody. He said Jake Moody's going to be there for Arizona, that they're evaluating the position like they do any position. But, people have ups and downs. Jake Moody's a talented guy, yada, yada, yada. What was your feeling watching Jake Moody crumble last night and 49ers throwback? He, has maybe he's sussing out why Jake Moody is still on the team and getting so many more opportunities than anyone else in his position would get. Says Kyle does not want to be wrong about Jake Moody. How do you feel about the Jake Moody situation?
Yeah, throwback is absolutely correct. The only reason Jake Moody is still on this team is Kyle was the moron that used a third round pick on a kicker.
Yeah.
That's why Jake Moody is still here, period. And if I was on the team, I would side eye Kyle and say, look, dude, your ego is getting in the way of our team's success. You can't do this anymore. You can't put your team in jeopardy just because your ego doesn't like the fact that you're getting checked for making a really, really stupid pick. Take the L, get another kicker, move on. Instead, no, my ego is the most important thing on this team. Therefore, Jake Moody stays. Well, that's another brilliant decision, Mr. GM. Stop it.
Yeah.
And you pointed out a long time ago, Jake Moody isn't it. And you looked at Jake Moody when you got the shots of his face. That's a guy that thought I'm going to miss
It's a
this
head
pick.
case. Yeah.
He did not look at all confident. And then you saw the kicks and boom, here we go again. It's just look, you gotta move on. I understand keeping Moody because it's the last game of the year, so what? Doesn't mean anything, let him play. Whatever. After that,
Going into next year, no.
no. And I'm not saying draft another kicker in the third round for God's sake. Don't do that. But bring in an undrafted kicker, and if he's got a heartbeat and if he's got a pulse, let him kick. Get rid of Jake Moody. I know you're in love with his leg. You know he's got the deep leg. Yeah. There are plenty of other kickers that can deep leg touchbacks.
I
That's
had
not the issue. It's just all of this is about Kyle's ego. If I was a star player on this team and Jake Moody misses another one, I would look right at Kyle and say, "You have to stop doing this to us."
I love that you're saying that because earlier this week, when Kyle did give that vote of confidence, obviously pre the Lions game, but during his presser, I think it was on Thursday, I tweeted kind of being like, this to me is a ridiculous statement from Kyle. And their pushback was, well, Kyle would lose the locker room if all of a sudden he started turning on his players. Where I think the opposite. I think if you're Fred Warner,
Not
if you're
this one.
George Kittle, Nick Bosa, especially if you're a guy who's playing through injury right now, I would be pissed if I'm putting my body on the line. I'm saying instead I could sit out. I could make sure I'm rested, I'm healing, I'm going to have a good off season, but I'm pushing myself because these games matter and you're allowing this player who has shown you he's not reliable it all comes down to him and you believe in him. If I was performing my job that poorly, I wouldn't be able to play. That's how I would feel.
Well,
So,
you wouldn't be around. You'd be gone.
yeah.
And everybody knows on this team, you have to. If you're a player on this team, you know why Jake Moody is still here. Kyle Shanahan's ego. It's time to dial it back. Because you look at it and just say, it's indefensible at this point. You have to know. You have to look in the mirror and say, he's here because of me. I have to dial back my ego. I have to admit I made a really stupid pick. I have to take the L and move on. Because you can't cost your team games over your ego. I mean, what a horrible choice that is. How can you choose when you're the head coach, offensive coordinator, and GM of a team to say, my ego is more important than my team winning games?
Yeah.
No, dude. Wrong answer.
Yeah.
And so
That's how
Moody
you
needs
start.
Moody needs
That's
to
how you
go.
lose players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moody, yeah, Jonathan says it in the chat. Moody should have been gone. Yeah. Moody should have been gone a year ago.
Completely agree. Our last topic, Kyle, on Kyle Shanahan and lots of people maybe speaking a little bit too soon. Kyle not only gave a vote of confidence for Jake Moody, but he also gave a vote of confidence for Nick Sorensen. And I kind of bought into it a little bit. I saw the first two games with Hufanga back. Saw that half with Drake Greenlaw back, and I thought, okay, maybe this is, we saw growing pains with Robert Saleh. Nick Sorensen looked really bad. They were playing soft zone coverage. Amon St. Brown had to walk 2 steps back into the end zone, where Renardo Green had to run 7 steps to even get to him. To me, it was
Why
insane.
are you playing soft zone 4 yards into the end zone when Detroit has the ball inside the 10?
So
You shouldn't be lining up in the end zone. Period.
my question to you is it possible that Nick Sorensen was coaching himself out of a job last night? Some people might say, before you give me an answer, the Lions, they're, one of the number 1 scoring offenses in the league. It's not, you got to kind of look at the season in totality. You can't just all base it on that. I would say the 49ers, they're supposedly going to blame it on injury and going to come back next year and go to the Super Bowl. I think the Lions are going to consistently be in it. I think the Lions are absolutely a team that you need to judge and compare yourself to. Much like I think that the Chiefs or that the Ravens, or now the Seahawks defensive coordinator, Brian Flores, I think that you have to compare yourself to the top of the league, to those measuring sticks, because the 49ers' eventual goal is to win that 6th Lombardi, to win that Super Bowl. So you're going to have to get through the Lions, and either your offense is going to have to start scoring 50 points, on every single, a touchdown every single drive, or you're going to have to rely on your defense to make a couple stops. I think that it's fair to judge Sorensen. I'm not saying you have to judge him completely off of one game, but I don't think you just throw it out and go, oh, they're a really good offense. Like, no, this matters, and how you play this team matters. And he looked horrible. Their defense looked horrible. And I've been, you and I think both, even going back to last year once again, when it comes to this team's failures, I think too many people blame the defense without looking at the offense and their inability to score. This is one game. I think you need to look at the defense and go, this is a step up to the measuring stick moment, and you guys failed. Unlike the Super Bowl last year, where they were kind of, on a downslope, and then they really stepped up in the biggest moment. Right. The defense looked horrible last night.
Yeah, and when you're making mistakes just on basic stuff, you've got your red zone defense and you've got your secondary lined up 4 yards deep in the end zone. What are you doing? It just that can't happen. That's just something that should never take place. So yeah, I think that they have to move on from Sorensen, not just because of this game, but the whole year. He hasn't had a willingness to blitz. He hasn't had a willingness to mask their intent.
Bottom of the league in blitzing percentage?
Yeah, they're or near it. I don't know if they're last, but I think they're bottom 3 at the very least, and maybe quite possibly last. Is that they are not where the league is in their thinking of how you succeed defensively in the league. And you've drafted cornerbacks who are great in man coverage. It's Renardo Green is great man corner.
So let's put them all in zone.
Demo, same thing. He can man people up. If you add another man corner in this draft as the guy to replace Travarius Ward, you need to leverage that talent. You need to use a man defensive scheme. You don't need to have these guys playing cover 3, 4, 5 yards off the line. So, yeah, I think they need to move on from Sorensen. I think that Sorensen was basically just a last-minute thing of this. They were hoping to get other people and couldn't. Then they go to the Super Bowl. So you don't have many options to begin with, and he was the last guy available.
A lot of the guys are already hired up, right?
Right. And so this year, take advantage of the fact that you're out of it now. And so let's start going after the talent as soon as the league season is over. Fire Sorensen, get somebody better, because the chances are very high you're going to get someone that's an upgrade.
Very frustrating from the defense. It felt like I know that they said there was rumors last year that Fred Warner had some impact on the game plan. And last night my dad kind of made a joke and he said, let Fred Warner start calling the game from the field right now, because some of the calls, the ways that they were lined up was so absolutely frustrating just to leave guys wide open. I think off coverage is so dumb anyways. I hate at the end of the games when you just let teams walk all the way down the field and then you start playing tight coverage once they get to the 5-yard line. And I hate that. The 49ers took it to a new level. Instead of just letting them walk down the field, then playing tight coverage, they them walk down the field and then still let them walk into the end zone and then try to make the tackle.
Yeah.
It was
You don't play bend but don't break inside the red zone. They did. What are you doing?
That's an
So,
insane thing to
and
do.
as everybody's saying, Julie is saying, and Jonathan as well, we don't need to play the wide nine anymore. The reason they
So
play the
outdated.
wide nine is
And that's
because
been their number one thing, right? Like they've been so married to the wide nine that there's certain play callers that they didn't even look at for the
right.
defense.
Okay, and so why is that? Because the wide nine is something Kyle had difficulty playing as an offensive coordinator. That's why he wants it, because it stopped him. Here's the problem with that. The wide nine has a lot of deficiencies. It's old. And here's the problem. The core problem with the system is that it puts your linebackers at physical risk of injury because they have to make ridiculous plays at all out speed in violent collisions. And now let's take a look at what's happened. Fred Warner's played with a broken bone most of the year. Drake Greenlaw's been out most of the year. Why is that? Wide nine.
Yeah.
Why are you playing this? And because Kyle's ego getting in the way of his team, saying, well, the wide nine beat my offense, therefore we're playing wide nine. No. And the other reason they play wide nine is because Chris
And that's
Kocurek.
how highly he thinks, like he puts himself first. Like my
Yeah,
offense is so good that if
right,
this gave me trouble, it must be the best thing ever.
right,
And like
right. And then what happens when a team doesn't run the Kyle Shanahan offense and runs against the wide nine? They kill it. You know, who's been the great defensive coordinators in the league? Guys that are playing 3-4 systems that are blitzing a ton. What are the Niners doing? They're playing wide nine and blitzing never. And what's happening? You're giving up way too much in the ground, and your linebackers are getting hurt left and right. You have to update your system.
yeah.
And this is another case of Kyle Shanahan putting himself ahead of the team. The wide nine stopped my offense, therefore we will run the wide nine. Chris Kocurek is great at coaching the wide nine. We have Chris Kocurek, therefore we will run the wide nine. No, you run the defense that works in today's offenses, and you run the defense that doesn't put your linebackers at excessive risk of injury. And when you've got two of the best linebackers in the league, and you're running a system that is basically custom designed to get them hurt, you're 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 just you're making it inevitable that your linebackers are going to go down, that you're not going to be able to stop the run, that your defense isn't going to be able to do what they can. They have to move on from the wide nine, if nothing else, for the sake of the health of
Yeah.
Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw.
Okay. Well, final. I know I just said final topic. Tim Kawakami apparently ran into Judd York. He wrote an article saying, and he wrote this, by the way, the announcement came out before the Lions game because they love, not only does Kyle like to speak too early about Jake Moody, about Nick Sorensen, about his own team, but apparently he gets it from the owner who said that Jed York said that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are not going anywhere. Now, this is kind of a non-story to me because I assumed this / feel like this has been put out there. I even though maybe it's a non-story, I wish he didn't say it. I don't know why he needs to say things like that. I think it takes all pressure off of the coach and off the GM when they've had poor team building strategy, as we've covered throughout this entire show and whole year and even before this season. I don't know why Jed York is so married to making them feel, comfortable, like they have these lifetime contracts here. I know that, they all try to act like they're friends, hunky dory. Jed York likes to feel accepted, but to me, winning should be number one. And I know that money is actually what's number one for him. And what I
Yep.
would say is when you're not making the playoffs, you're not having home playoff games, that affects your money. I do think next year, if they have another down year, that Kyle and Jen or one or the other will be on the hot seat because that's when it does start affect money. That's when season ticket holders no longer want to, when you're losing your final game at home and people don't even want to go to the final game because it's like, okay, well, they're going to get blown out. Like that's when your money does start getting affected. I Are you surprised that Jed York made this comment? Do you wish, how do you feel about it? What was your takeaway? Like I said, I was not surprised, wished it didn't happen. But I feel like they've had poor ownership for a while, so it didn't shock me. A lot of people were, astounded by this. To me, we kind of knew this
Yeah,
they weren't going anywhere this offseason.
this doesn't come as a surprise at all. This is who the Yorks are.
No.
I think why Jed said this is because the narrative is out there, at least from some, that there should be a hot seat for Kyle and John. Even if one doesn't exist, it should exist. And Jed wants to put that to rest. And that's why he said that. This is about controlling a media narrative to reassure the season ticket holders, don't worry, no, we're not going to do
Everything's fine,
anything
we're all good.
drastic. Everything's good. We're riding the wave. We're just going to do what we always do. Don't cancel your season tickets. We're going to keep Kyle. We're going to keep John. We're going to resign Brock. We're going to do all this stuff. We're going to do the status quo, and you're going to give us your money. Blah blah blah. That's what Jed was hoping for, and that's why Jed did what he did when he did. It's about reassuring the season ticket holders to keep the cash flow going. It's a
Interesting
reaction to the
because
money because that's what he cares about. It's all about the money for them.
when I hear that, I'm like, I don't feel comforted. I feel like you have a complacent owner. But I get what you're
Yeah,
saying is he's trying to say, kind of like the don't we're not gonna overreact to this season, so you shouldn't either.
yeah,
I'm gonna
exactly
try to
right.
pretend everything's
That's it.
normal. That makes sense. Okay. Because
That's what
originally
he's
I was
doing.
like, to me, I wouldn't like, what do you mean? Don't worry, they're not going anywhere. Like, no, I want there to be pressure on him. But in order to keep the money the same, you're trying to say, don't panic. Don't make any rash, don't start canceling your season tickets now. Don't make rash decisions. This is on injuries. Where Kyle, John, this is a winning team and we're going to get right back to winning next year. No one overreact.
Yeah, that's what this was.
Interesting. Okay, I see where he's coming from now. Not I don't think it's right, but I at least
It
see why
isn't.
he did it. Because at first I was like, to me, this is stupid. Like, if I was a fan, like as a fan, I was like, I'd be pissed hearing this. But I see what you're saying. He's kind of going for more of the novice fan trying to say, hey, you know, much like the team is trying to say this is just a one-off year. He's trying to
Yeah,
do that too.
yeah.
And in so many words or in less words, he's saying next year is going to be better. Keep buying tickets for that.
Yep, yep.
And to be fair,
It's about protecting the cash flow.
yeah. And I was gonna say, to be fair, they locked up the last, they lost the conference, last in the NFC West. They're gonna be playing some bad teams next year. Now the only
Yep.
problem is this year they didn't look good against good or bad teams. I mean, maybe there was one, the worst team in the NFL they looked good against. But I mean, even against the Patriots, they had a couple scary moments where it looked like the Patriots could win, and that was before Drake May was their quarterback. So I don't know how inspired you feel, but they do have a much easier schedule next year.
Yeah.
And we got lots to talk about still. Next year or next week, they're going to be playing the Arizona Cardinals. Hopefully, surprising to be saying this, but hopefully they lose and they hold on to that 11 overall draft pick, highest draft pick they've had in quite a while. I hope they go trenches with it. Tom is being more
Yeah.
of a realist,
No,
and
I think they will go trenches, just not the trench side you want.
yeah,
They'll go defensive line.
true. Um, Anyone watching, make sure to one, hit the like button, two, subscribe, and three, make sure to read Tom Jensen's article. He goes over more draft prospects, what went wrong, this entire season. And we're going to be going live after the game next week as well. So there's more season left. I know we're talking a lot kind of like long-term strategy, but there is one more game. It'll be interesting. Does Jake Moody have a full meltdown in the last game? Do they beat the Cardinals and ruin their draft status, but it's have some inspiration for their team? What does Nick Bosa look like against Kyler Murray? Kyler Murray embarrassed Nick Bosa in the first play of their last meetup. So maybe Nick Bosa wants some revenge and get some sacks on Kyler. I'm still excited. Love the 49ers. I'm sad that there's not going to be meaningful football in January, but excited nonetheless. I hope everyone has a really wonderful and safe, most importantly, safe New Year. If you're driving, be careful. If you're drinking, do not drink and drive. Uber, call a friend, walk home. Absolutely do not drink and drive. It's not worth it. Especially on nights like tonight, not only tons of cops out, but just so many people. And even if you're sober driving, which I'm going to be doing, be more vigilant than you normally would be. And once again, I had a really lovely holiday season. For me, it's not over yet because my birthday's coming up and I still got to spend some time with my dad and hang out with him, which I'm very excited to do. Family is very important to me. It's been a really important year. I think I have gone through some ups and downs in the last 2 years, and I've felt a lot better, especially towards the second half of this year. I've done some stuff that have helped me with my own self-confidence. One of them being, sticking to this YouTube thing. I think if you can,
You've done
make a
great.
promise to yourself and keep it, it helps prove that you should believe in yourself and you should
Yeah.
trust yourself when you have an aspiration or a goal and you keep it, do it. I don't know if you're big into New Year's resolutions. I think that sometimes people can put too much pressure on that stuff. All I would say is if you do like the idea of a new year and starting over, um, I think you can do that any day, but absolutely take advantage of the new year if that inspires you. But also don't make it something that's, so huge that you're never going to accomplish it and you're going to end up giving up or feeling bad about yourself. I like to set reasonable, maybe aspirations instead of goals.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, something that I achieve in a year, but something that I'm working towards. I like to do a little bit of a clean, just make my area feel a little bit better. And then, like I said, my new year starts a little bit later because I still have some more celebrating to do with my birthday and my family. But I just like to I'm a really big summer person, even though I have a January birthday. When I was younger, we used to always celebrate it in the summer because I lived in Northern California and it gets really rainy out. And it was kind of during the winter break, so a lot of people couldn't come over. So we had a bigger party in the summer. I've always been a sunshine person. I love, I've been taking my vitamin D sprays because there's not as much sun out. So if you struggle with any mental stuff, vitamin D is supposed to help. And then mostly I'm going to continue to try to hang out with my friends, hang out with my family. And even if I can't hang out with them, call them, text them, just let them know when they're on my mind. I've made a bigger effort to do that this year instead of just like thinking a positive thought in my head. Actually tell the person, hey, I'm grateful for you. I'm thinking about you. Maybe I can't be there right now, but I want you to know that you're on my mind. That's why I wanted to open this saying thank you for Tom's gift and why I try to shout out my dad as much as possible. I have a really, close little family and I feel very grateful for them. So wanted to say that going in the new year, and however you guys celebrate, big or small, alone or with people, do something you enjoy, whether it's reading a book, reading a movie, or watching a movie, reading Tom's article, hanging out with us on our stream. We really appreciate you, and we have lots of 49ers football to talk about next week, and then all off season we're gonna have lots of updates for you. So I just want to end it off saying that, but sorry for taking over at the end there, Tom.
Oh, that's fine. It's so well said. Just straight from the heart. You've got a lot to be proud of what you've accomplished this year, personally, professionally, and with this channel. And I'm really grateful to be a part of that with you.
Thank you so much. It's
And
helped my confidence quite a bit. So thank you
well,
guys.
good.
Like I
Well,
said,
good. And Happy New Year, everybody. Be
happy New
careful.
Year, everyone.
Be careful
Be safe.
and good luck.
Like, subscribe, read Tom's article on Twitter. It's NinerCast, Sports Illustrated, Fan Nation, all that. Literally all our topics every week are taken from there. So if you want a preview of what we're going to talk about, or some more maybe nitty-gritty details that we didn't get into, always check out Tom. Really, really appreciate you guys. I'll be going live with Tom's peer, I guess I would say, Connor Wayland. We went live last week for the first time, and I think we're going to go live again. Might be on Thursday. He's a little bit younger, and I think some people are staying up late and celebrating. So tomorrow, it might be a solo update from me, because the 49ers will be having practice. Normally they have the day after the game is off, and then Tuesday's an off day, but because it was a Monday night game, things are a little bit different. So they will be down in Santa Clara tomorrow. So if there's any more Brock updates or breaking news, I'll make sure to go live and give it to you guys. So like and subscribe. Sorry for the long-winded goodbye, but I appreciate you guys. Have a good night.